This past week, I have been playing the full version of Elden Ring Nightreign, and yeah, I've already platinumed the game, got all the achievements, and in my 70 hours, I've done pretty much everything the game has to offer. I've beaten all the Night Lord bosses, every character quest, made sure to beat every single boss using a different character in solo as well, and honestly, I still want to play the game for many more hours. Now, for today, I just want to focus on the solo experience, as I might save my actual review for when the game is released, because there will be spoilers in that one. Unlike in this video, I'm not going to include anything story related, no Revenant's gameplay, no skins, Dark Souls bosses, nor any Night Lord bosses, except for the two that most people have already seen. Now, if you want to get this game just for the solo experience, I honestly would recommend it, but that is assuming you are willing to put in many hours in multiplayer first. Unless you are a person that has many hours in Elden Ring and you're begging for that boss rush mode or PvE arena to test out all your knowledge and skills. And even then, if you are that person, I would recommend still playing the multiplayer first to familiarize yourself with the gameplay loop, the pacing, boss movesets, and just acquiring lots of relics, which relics are buffs that you get after each run to equip onto your characters, and these can be very powerful. Now, the reason I'm saying all this is because the game is 100% balanced around the multiplayer experience. Very little went into making the solo mode accessible, although there actually were some things that made it potentially be easier than the multiplayer, which I will get into. Now, the challenges when it comes to playing solo is that any single time that you die, you cannot get revived by others. And when you die and respawn in this game, you end up losing a level. And when you die to a Night Lord boss or an end of day boss, it pretty much just ends the run on the spot, unless you do have a particular item, which I'll talk about later. But you pretty much have to deal with all the exact same challenges. The Night Lord bosses behave the exact same way, the movesets are identical, the enemy density is not changed, and the fact that you're by yourself means that there's no opportunities to kill multiple enemies or bosses at the same time to stack up on runes or buffs. Like in my dozens of hours playing solo, I only reached level 15, which is max, one time. It was like this insane perfect RNG run I had with the Iron Eye, which is like easily the best character in the game. And don't worry, I will be making character guides and ranking videos pretty soon. But I think the most challenging thing is that most of the buffs and character abilities rely on multiplayer, and you're just not benefiting off those things at all. There is way less creativity. And further proof of all these challenges that it does present, out of the few hundred people that got to play the game early, I'm only one of a handful of people that managed to complete a solo run, let alone for every boss and every character. And you guys know me, I'm a loser with like 4,000 hours in Elden Ring and thousands of hours across all the other Souls games, so the game does very heavily incentivize Elden Ring's knowledge of movesets. But there still are so many different mechanics, buffs, gameplay elements that it makes it not feel anything like an Elden Ring run, nor like an Elden Ring boss rush mode. Now, despite the little amount of people that have done it, I firmly believe that most people are competent enough to do it solo because there are many methods and tips that I've learned to make it really easy. Like, soon as you learn about which parts of the map are meant for day 1 and day 2, the game is just made twice as easy. When most people start off the game, they end up running into a field boss, get stuck for 10 minutes, and then it sets you back for the whole run. So understanding which points of interest you're meant to attack first is kind of half the difficulty right there. When I first started doing solo mode, which was like 10 hours in, it took roughly 7 attempts just to beat the one Night Lord boss. Which is kind of funny, people complaining about the older Souls games and their boss runbacks. Good old Nightreign here has 40-minute boss runbacks. But jokes aside, nowadays when I do solo mode, I have like a 90% success rate for any Night Lord boss, and it's to the point that for me, it's easier to play solo than it is to play with randoms. Which is somewhat similar to the other Souls games. If you really know a boss's moveset and mechanics, the game is made harder for you if you summon, because the enemies have way more health and poise, and it makes the bosses behave a lot more weird and unpredictable. And this is also true for Nightreign. You'll sometimes struggle to stance break a single trash mob. Now, including that point, we might as well get into the differences between the two modes. One, enemies are also just more passive in solo play. When you're getting ganked by mobs or by a boss, they typically only attack one at a time. I remember fighting the Draconic Tree Sentinel and his lackeys, and I just focused on the main boss the entire time because the other guys were just running around like idiots. But you still have to be wary of them. Now, there are some circumstances in the game where bosses would like shout or roar and apply a debuff to the character to make the enemies just hard focus onto you. This is also a concept that is for the multiplayer as well, but it is still worthy to note. So the Gladius triple dogfight isn't that bad when they separate, especially if you do have holy damage, which is like another tidbit. If you don't know, all the Knights Lord bosses have a particular weakness, and throughout certain parts of the fight or throughout certain attacks, if they get hit by this weakness, they will get staggered and potentially debuffed to take more damage and deal less damage. Another thing that solo mode does differently is give you guaranteed self-reviving items. This item, the Wending Grace, lets you revive when you die to a Knight boss or Knight Lord boss. It picks you up and it gives you all your health back, as well as some iframes for a short period. If you die outside of those particular bosses with this item, you'll just respawn like normal, lose 1 level, and you will not lose the item. But yeah, this was like a must for solo mode, because without this item and dying to an end of day boss or a Night Lord boss, you just get kicked back to the round table hold. Now you do have a way to get 2 of these items guaranteed. You can buy one of any merchant throughout your expedition between day 1 or day 2. By the way, all the merchants that you do see have a shared inventory, except for the merchants right before the Night Lord boss, which is where you can actually buy your second one for another 10,000 runes. Now you can get more than 2, but they're going to be very rare drops of bosses. Like in my 70 hours, I've only had it drop 4 times, once in multiplayer and 3 in solo. It's not more likely one way or the other, and yes, you can get these in multiplayer too. So although you can get more, I wouldn't really rely on it. And another thing to keep in mind is that it does take up an item slot, but thankfully, be that you can't physically use the item, when you're toggling through your items, it just automatically skips it. The same thing actually applies to the Stone Sword keys too. There is also another passive buff that works the exact same way as this item that you get by completing the last Shifting Earth event, which you'll access after beating most of the Night Lord bosses, and it's only accessible assuming you have it active and have beaten it. But yeah, you can technically get a guaranteed 3rd self-revive. Now, one other thing that I noticed was different in solo mode was the drops. Like, items just drop differently between the two. In solo mode, depending on your character, would be dependent on your drops. Like if you're playing the Guardian, for instance, you're more likely to find stuff like halberds, buffs to guard counters and blocking, health boosting items. Playing the Recluse, you'll be more likely to find FP buffs and catalysts. Sometimes the drops can be a little random, so it's not super limiting, but it definitely tries to give you the stuff that you would mainly benefit off. However, this doesn't necessarily work the same way in multiplayer. Now, this is just my hypothesis, but the way it works from my understanding is that it still does take into account what character you are, but it also takes into account what characters your teammates are too. So as a Guardian, you can still find halberds, but if you have an Iron Eye on your team, you might come across a few more bows than you otherwise normally would. Now, the whole purpose of this is to incentivize communication and teamwork, which 100% makes the multiplayer so much easier, and it also makes me wonder why they did so little for the multiplayer communication features, but you know, that's a convo for another video. So all in all, I don't really think it's that accessible to be like a primary solo player unless you have like a decent amount of experience in either Nightreign or in Elden Ring. And I definitely recommend for your first few games, just hop into the multiplayer, just random queue, just get a good feel of how the game actually works. But if I were to rank the difficulty of the game modes from easiest to hardest, number 1 is playing with a competent group with a voice chat. Like, it does not get much easier than this. Like, if your team is good, you'll first try Night Lord bosses that you haven't even seen before. The second easiest way to play the game is playing it solo if you are an experienced player, like no one is getting in your way and enemies just aren't getting buffed. Number 3 is playing with an inexperienced group in voice chat. Number 4 is playing with randoms. And number 5, the hardest way to play the game is playing it solo as an inexperienced player. Actually, the real hardest way to play the game is if you're playing with 3 people and one person just keeps disconnecting the entire time. That's the real hardest way to play the game. But anyway, that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover for this video. As I mentioned, my next video is probably going to end up being the review, which is going to cover my overall thoughts and pros and cons in the game. I do also want to make a video covering the scalings and how the damage numbers work in this game. And then after that, I'll probably end up making my character guides where I just go over every single character and break down the best way to build around them, the best way to play them, and how good they are in both multiplayer and in solo. Anyway, catch you guys around. Bye.